can you give me any update on Venezuela? What's going on there? What's happening?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like I think they're sending, they're building up a considerable fleet. We're just talking about, not just a couple of boats off the coast, but just a significant portion of the U.S. Navy, which is already, which is a very large Navy. I think the last I checked, it was at least an eighth of the U.S. Navy, and then they were sending a couple more ships, including, they already have a submarine there or submarines on its way there. And these are, major ships that are clearly not suited for smuggling interdiction. That's not what you use these missile carriers and submarines for. They fire missiles. And so maybe the U.S. is planning some kind of decapitation strike against Venezuela. Again, it's like the Israelis are leading the way. This is the new way to go after, your weaker opponents. There is one of the ships is an amphibious landing craft that has, I think, 2,000 Marines aboard. So they could put 2,000, but that's not enough to really invade the country. Maybe to carry out some sort of mission. I don't know exactly what it would be, but it looks like something is afoot. It really, why do you send that many ships? And I don't know. I find it embarrassing that that we would be so obsessed with this country. And we can't just leave them alone. You don't have to like Maduro or the government, but we don't need to do this. It seems like behavior that's not becoming to a real superpower. That one that has some sort of pretense to moral authority. Anyway, I think if we do it, it's gonna actually just reduce our moral standing in the world that much more, especially within Latin America, because there is a great deal of sensitivity to past U.S. interventions, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and the Latin Americans haven't forgotten those. And, going up into the second half of the 20th century, most definitely, they haven't forgotten those, and they're very sensitive about that. And this is even if the governments do not, in general, support Maduro's government in Venezuela. They're just not going to take kindly to this. There's going to be a very severe reaction, and I think you'll see Brazil moving even farther away from the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, are there a lot of drugs that go from Venezuela to the U.S. via boat?
I haven't heard that. It's not something I closely follow, but I haven't. When you hear about the big cartels, they're all in Colombia. The U.S. actually has a lot of
Colombia and Mexico, right? I mean, those are the...
Yeah. Well, I mean, Mexico is partly they are in Mexico, but that's part of that is transit. Like when you're talking about, I think, cocaine, like the growers are in Mexico, or the processors, that's where the drug is actually is prepared and packaged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, how the U.S. is trying to sell to the world, because it just seems like a very aggressive move. And I guess, is that how the whole world is looking at it? Just like, well, here's just another aggressive action. Is anybody understanding the justification and says like, okay, yeah, this makes sense? Or does the whole world like, this is what's happening?
It's hard to, right. It really seems, it's almost, I mean, it's actually kind of like it's what we called gunboat diplomacy, but maybe there's no even diplomacy involved in here. It is very crude and a kind of old style imperialism. And in a way, I think that could be better in that, we tear the mask from the imperialism. It's probably not something that probably not, you can't be sure, probably not something that would have been done under Biden. Though they were always putting the screws on Venezuela. I think they loosened them somewhat for reasons of reducing oil prices. But in general, the hostility towards Venezuela is found on both sides of the aisle within the U.S. But the Democrats, or at least previous presidents, probably wouldn't have been this crude. They would be, maybe looking at special operations and CIA-sponsored coups and all kinds of nasty stuff and cruel economic sanctions. But this really, this sending the U.S. fleet and who knows what they're going to do. I don't think anybody but Trump would do that. But by doing that, he just makes it so plainly, painfully obvious to the rest of the world what the U.S. is about.
Do you think
That
it's
it is the hegemon, you know.
right? I mean, I'm just trying to understand the if it's not about the drugs, if that's just to cover, is it more about getting the oil? The
Yeah, well, obviously the oil is a big part of it. I mean, Venezuela is supposed to have the largest proven oil reserves in the world. I mean, it is a major, potentially, a very, very major oil producer. And it's already an important one, but it could be, again, there are a lot of untapped reserves there. So, yeah, obviously there is an interest in the oil itself. And then there's this general, I think, view, again, kind of an extension of the Monroe Doctrine, that this is our part of the world, and we just don't, we won't stand for having, a government that opposes us. I think it's equally geopolitical and economic.
Do you think that Monroe Doctrine can even be enforced now? I mean, that's something that is part of that needs to be retired, right? You can't really have the Monroe Doctrine in the multipolar world.
Well, you can. I mean, the thing is, this is something that the U.S. almost certainly can get away with. Again, it is our part of the world, and these Venezuela is a poor, a weak country that doesn't have missiles of its own.
Well, get away with what? I mean, I still don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, I don't know too either. But whatever it is, they might get away with it. I don't know. It's really bizarre. Who knows? But whether it's a decapitation strike. But even if they succeed in a decapitation strike or something like that, or they do land these 2,000 Marines there, they may be able to do a great deal of damage. But from I don't know a whole lot about Venezuela, but I think there is this kind of wishful thinking that we've often found within previous administrations, like with the invasion of Iraq. They're going to greet us with flowers and et cetera, et cetera. That just didn't happen. In the end, we were left with insurgency. And I think that you find the same thing in Venezuela. There's a certain amount of dissatisfaction. There are people that are very passionately opposed to Maduro's government. But we saw that in Iran too. The moment that you actually invade, it's just like you've made friends of those enemies, and they have a new enemy, and it is you. That's what we may find. And even if they're weaker, it's their land. For them it's existential. They're mad. They have guns. And they're fighting in the jungle, and it just could be turned into a nightmare. I don't know what we're going to try to do, but it could go very badly wrong.
Right. So do you want to revise your statement that we can succeed in our own hemisphere?
Well, we might. I don't know what they're thinking of, or at least I don't know what it is that they're trying to carry out.
I feel like
just the thing is that we can't. Yeah, I think actually trying to occupy the country, and you think, well, maybe 100 years ago we could do that. We can't do that now. I don't think so. I really don't. But maybe we could still wreak a great deal of destruction, just simply because we have all these missiles, or at least maybe we don't actually, but we'll find out. Destroy the presidential palace, maybe assassinate a lot of their leaders, and throw the country into chaos. But we may be surprised, that the country and the movement that Maduro's government is built on may be much more resilient than we thought. But I'm not going to make any firm predictions. We can damage them. We can. We could, but we can't really occupy the country, and I don't think we can impose a government. We could succeed in imposing a government to our liking. We might get some Juan Guaido in there, but I doubt he would last very long. I think there would be everybody would see who he was. So, yeah, I guess what I'm just saying is that, yeah, I don't think we can work our will the way we could, again, a century ago under the old style imperialism. But we can just wreak a lot of damage without consequences, because, again, they can't fight back, and they don't have any allies in the area that could really protect them. So if we just stay offshore firing missiles, I don't know what that would accomplish other than just a lot of destruction and maybe chaos, within Venezuela. And if that's all that we're aiming to do, then you could call it success, but I don't really see how that is to anybody's benefit, how that would
Right.
be to anybody's benefit.
Yeah, everyone likes to talk about how powerful America is, and that it makes you think, okay, they'll have successes, I'll have successes. But I mean, just for me looking at it, we always say how powerful and omnipotent America is, but I just see a string of catastrophic failures again and again ever since World War II. I'm starting to wonder if World War II was much of a success, actually. But like, there's, I just feel like there's not the evidence to back it up for American success. Just we don't have it. Like, well, do we have a successful military operation, regime change, any type of thing that we're talking about? Like we may overthrow government or just kill a lot of people, but it's never a success,
Right. Right.
for the United
Yeah.
States.
Right. Yeah. I think the exceptions to that statement, you're right. I think since World War II, there's no, significant success that you can point to, that our wars have ended in failure, starting with the Korean War. In the end, well, you could say it was a partial success. The U.S. forces prevented the North Korean forces from taking over the entire peninsula. But then after that, it was a failure. We went farther north, were pushed back, and suffered significant casualties. In the end, had to agree to the truce that still isn't in effect. So it ended in failure. And then Vietnam, you have to say, was a failure. There's no success there. It's just a loss of a lot of life. We think about our own lives as it's natural, but especially Vietnamese lives. Something like 2 million Vietnamese died, because of that war. And then you go on and on. The Iraq War. Say, well, we're still there. That you can't claim that was a success. That was a horrible failure. And Afghanistan. Yeah, I mean, again, we're good at destroying, blowing up buildings and killing people, but to actually impose our will, a political solution, we have been miserable failures over the last several decades. I think there's no question about that. And so probably see the same in Venezuela. We might be able to overthrow this government just through, wreaking a lot of destruction on it, but it won't be that. But yet I would be very surprised if we're really able to impose our will on Venezuela and have a government that is just simply subservient to us. I think there will be so much anger that, any attempt to do that is bound to fail.
I don't think there's going to be another election. I think this is it for America. I don't think we're going to survive. I mean, look how close. It's only been 7, 8 months. Like this type. It's got. Do you think we're going to make it? Can we get out of this?
I think we are, but yeah, it's been a wild ride. It's exhausting. It almost seems like it's been a whole 4 years already, and we're just
warming
through.
up.
Yeah, we're not even close to a quarter of the way through.
And we just all these conflicts, Trump was elected because everybody thought that he would draw down these conflicts. But right now, it's been 7, 8 months, and now we got another conflict looming. Venezuela, we bombed Iran already. It looks like we're going to be ready. We're fully committed to whatever Israel wants to do. He's not pulling us out of Ukraine. That war continues. Now there's talk about long-range missile strikes, and he just oscillating between Putin and I are great friends. Oh, I hate that guy. We got to go on offense. Just like this is, and then cryptic messages about the end of the world, essentially, from him on Twitter, and saying that he wants to get to heaven and God's got a divine plan for him. I don't know. I mean, it's a coin toss.
Yeah, I would say that we're going to make it through the next 3.5 years.
Financial collapse on the horizon.
Yeah, right. Again, that's regardless of Trump. Though, Trump has exacerbated it. Yeah, especially with he hasn't slowed down spending at all. And, the tariffs, are creating a lot of economic chaos. Though, recently there was that court decision against him. So those tariffs, or I think the great majority of them, may expire in October. We'll see. But anyway, yeah, it's been a wild ride, and there's a great deal of uncertainty. I have to say that on Ukraine, even though there is a lot of incoherence, and a lot of reasons to worry. It still is better and has been better so far under him than it was under Biden. And the main thing I would point to was those missile strikes into pre-2014 Russian territory, that those have ended. And so far, it looks like, the Trump administration is sticking to that. Um, and then there is some kind of effort to withdraw. This new arrangement to have the Europeans pay for it. That's something. It is. I think that's. Uh, Again, you never feel completely at ease or confident that any sort of arrangement that's been worked out will last, because we just see this as a very unpredictable character, and he just may. Who knows how. You know. He may reverse himself. He can reverse himself on stupid decisions, which is great. He's done that on a few occasions, but he can reverse himself on the right ones. One thing, like we say, I've said, and I know many other analysts have said, that, well, one thing that came out of that Alaskan summit meeting is that, okay, they agreed, okay, forget the ceasefire. We have to, Trump, accepted Putin to the Russian government's position, first a peace settlement, then a ceasefire. And so far, that's true, but I just don't have any confidence. And, maybe a month from now, he'll forget that he made that promise, and he'll start insisting on a ceasefire again.
Yeah.
So
No, he's just.
I just can't. I just don't have any sense of security when it comes to any of these decisions.
Right, right. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
he's
you
just
have
all.
to say, so
ahead.
far when it comes to Ukraine, he has done better than Biden. I think we have to admit that. That's the one area where things seem a little, are less frightening than they were before. But that may change any day.